Let's talk about punishment itself, getting back to dignity and equality. Our punishment system, when the way we punish is almost, like the professor was saying, it's almost otherworldly by this day and age. So when you come into prison, what's the first thing that's not very pleasant that happens to you? Anybody know? Has anyone ever been strip searched in this room? Like, okay, plug your ears in. I don't want to rehash stuff, but it's not very nice. Bend over, spread your cheeks, lift your sack, spread the lips. Like, I'm serious. This is what people do just to get into prison, right? If you ever get transferred in a prison, then you have maybe 3 or 4 of these types of strip searches that happen. And just sort of by measure, I'm not sure if you're aware, but if you get arrested by the police and you go get booked in a station house, what can those police officers do to you? Same thing. They can strip search you before they put you in the holding cell. You can be strip searched. But wait a second, I didn't commit any crime. It was proved. You all let me go. I didn't commit any crime. Doesn't matter. Anybody who ever has to get put in a holding cell, the police have a right to strip search you. Even if they screwed up, even if it was their mistake. Right? That's how badly we want to keep contraband out of jails, is that we will subject people to this type of treatment. And so we get to also issues of solitary confinement. Solitary confinement being the alienation of someone to the highest degree, putting people alone in cells. They lose sense of contact, their sensory deprivation, and start talking to themselves because there's no one else to talk to. And then in the most, in decompensation, in those stages, you start carving on your body and using things to cut yourself up, cutting your genitals and scarring your body, these sorts of things. When Malcolm X, wrote about him being in solitary, he was just banging his head against the wall, right? And so these are things that happen in this system of punishment, which in California, for example, there's Pelican Bay, which is only solitary confinement. Every single cell there is solitary confinement. So we've built a cottage industry around this idea that it's a good idea to put people in solitary, which we've known since the beginning drives people crazy. In prison, there's rampant sexual and gender violence. I've done study, I've written on this. And of course, there's the human rights issue of having yourself violated. And when I say sexual and gender violence, I'm talking also prostitution, forced sex slavery, right? The difference being, at least as a prostitute, you can make some money. As a slave, you're somebody's. And so there's no money to be made, all the way to forced families where you're the daddy and you create a family, right? And so these are other issues that bear on human rights. But one other thing to think about, when people who've been sexually assaulted in prison come out of prison, our government has done studies, the United States government has done studies to suggest one of the ways to regain masculinity, which got taken away in prison, do we know what that is? Do we have a sense of I'm talking men specifically, not to say that women don't get sexually assaulted in prison, don't take me for saying that, but for men, how do men regain masculinity? Any sense what they might do? They go out and assault someone else, right? This is like empirical evidence that this is one way to get back into the game, is to rape someone else, right? Pass that along and regain your manhood. So not only are we talking about the initial violation of the person, but the person or persons that individual is going to violate. In the prison system, there's no such thing as the Fourth Amendment when it comes to your prison cell, which means they can come in and shake down your cell for no reason at all, right? So again, how this gets abused, people's lives get turned upside down, etc. One of the brilliant things our prison system does is it enforces our punishment system, really. And sometimes we just never really think about this. So imagine when you get a 3 to 5 year sentence, underlying that 3 to 5 year sentence is a sentence of celibacy. I mean, just think about that. That's a part of the punishment, and there's no way around it, because sexual relations with other people, even consensual in prison, forbidden. Condoms, forbidden. Conjugal visits, forbidden, forbidden, forbidden. There's even in some prison systems, there's punishment, additional punishment for masturbation. So within that punishment frame, there's an imposition of celibacy that we think is a great idea. Yes, let's further alienate a person from his or her sexuality. In addition, my area of thinking about prisons has been long to think about Muslims in prison, and to think about how historically Muslims have been repressed since really the 50s was really bad, in the 60s. So religious repression, again, is another type of violation that occurs, because you're essentially stripping a person from the ability to worship, to have free exercise. And not just that, but we know that religion helps rehabilitation. So we're depriving someone of something that can actually help improve that person's life. So I do want to sort of recognize that. Please sit down, enjoy, just relax. There's lots of seating. I hate to see you standing. Thanks. Yeah, so religious liberty, we have to look at that as a fundamental human right, universal human right, that does get swiped away when, for example, Martin Sostre, for example, Thomas X. Cooper. These are documented cases of people being thrown into solitary confinement just for claiming to be Muslim, just for wanting to have freedom as a Muslim to worship, right? And so here's some images just to give us some punctuation on the punishment system that we roll with, right? Spit masks, right? On people who are on suicide watch. We just basically mummify people and throw them in a room that doesn't have anything, because we don't want them to use something to kill themselves. So we're going to torture someone just to keep them alive, which is, I got a sick sense of humor, but we torture someone just to keep the person alive, right? Here in Texas, this individual got fired from, the correctional force because for doing this, shooting gas canisters directly at people. This happened a couple of years back in Texas. Leaked footage came out, and so the person who took this footage got kicked off the force as well, right? So naturally, if you hadn't seen Mos Def or Yasin Bey, who did a video recording of him trying to endure force feeding. It was in protest. I can't remember if he was in protest of Guantanamo Bay's force feeding, or it was in protest of the force feeding going on in California. In California, they had, a hunger strike. And so if you haven't seen this is another one to check out. He couldn't finish the other nostril. They got down one nostril. When they tried to do the second, he was done, crying in front of the world. He just underwent this, which was just unbelievable. But yeah, prisons in California, when they had the hunger strike, imagine that people in prison, Muslims included, were signing non-resuscitation forms. In other words, if I die, don't resuscitate me. I want to die. I'm fasting to death, right? And so the state did not honor those requests and still force-fed people who were trying to fast to death. And so you don't even have that kind of autonomy, right? When you want to will your life away through fasting or some other form of protest, no way, says the state. George Steiny, the youngest American ever killed by the death penalty, who was 13 years old, little kid crying when they stuck the helmet on him. This is our system, just so that we know. We killed 13-year-old Alabama recently killed a 70-something-year-old man. I mean, he walks with 2 canes. What's this person going to do to our, it's one of those things where it's really difficult to think how that person hasn't aged out of criminality. But so on the far end of age and in the shallow end of age, right, we have these situations. The American Bar Association, which accredits the law school that's at that is on this campus, says in its treatment of prisoners standards, in standard 23.1, says correctional authorities should respect the human rights and dignity of prisoners. No prisoner should be subjected to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or conditions, right? And so ABA accredits, so we give them lots of respect, lots of props, and we make a statement like this, all kinds of credit. But when it comes to, right, fulfilling these kinds of words, prisons are just, sort of nowhere to be found in terms of this type of treatment. So those are the aspirations, but what happens in reality is a different story. I'd be happy to talk more. This is kind of my bread and butter, so I don't want to spend too much time on this.